was Dad in the Navy?
Jim went into the Navy before he met me. He had come out of the Navy. I was going with a sailor whose name was Bob Jeffrito. He had black hair, same height, weight, and everything as Jim. He drove a blue convertible with the top down. So did Jim. A blue convertible went in front of the theater and honked and waved at me. Well, they wouldn't let me wear my glasses inside the box office because it didn't make me look pretty, okay? So I didn't have my glasses on, so I assumed it was Bob Jeffrito, but it was Jim instead. That's why he came up to the box office and asked me for a date.
Talk about the time you and your son went to Long Island.
My son John took me to New York to meet, actually Long Island, which is near New York, to meet a medium who was famous throughout California and I guess everywhere. There's been many books written about him, and he's been on television. And people seem to be quite happy with the results of the hereafter after talking with him. We went there a few years ago, and it was quite interesting. He told us things that only John and I knew that could have happened in our home, things that could not have been traced on paper or through friends. These were very personal things, and he told us these things. So that's one reason that I have my belief that I do in that part of the world. And he made it less frightening to die.
Do you want to share what he, how he proved himself to you, or not?
George Anderson told me that my husband came through and told him to tell me he wanted to thank me for the planting. I knew what he was talking about, but my son John didn't, because John never knew that after his father died, the Lions Club in Oregon sent a tree to Hemet to be planted in his name. And that was the planting that he was talking about. That was one thing that convinced me wholly.
And then the other thing was Jimmy. He wasn't supposed to be born right. You were worried before we went there.
It wasn't about Jimmy.
He was going to be Mongoloid.
Kyle.
Oh, Kyle? Okay.
Kyle was born first.
Before we went, the doctors?
Before we went, the doctor had told my grandson Mark and his wife Amy that their baby might be, I think they call it Mongoloid, I'm not sure. Anyway, there would be something wrong with it. And we were all worried about it, very worried, very concerned. And my husband came through and said, and there was only the one baby being born, okay? My husband came through and said, don't worry, the baby is fine. It will be fine when he's born, and I will be there. Oh, and he said, excuse me, I have to back up. He said the babies will be fine, and I will be there. And we didn't realize he had said babies until I returned home. When I returned home, I did not know that there was another baby going to be born because I hadn't been told yet. They wanted to surprise me when I came home that my granddaughter Jamie was pregnant and going to have a child. And she did, Jimmy. Mark and Amy were in the hospital as she was going to deliver to Kyle. They were in the room together, and I was in the waiting room, and so was my daughter Dolly. And they had the television on. For no reason, after Kyle was born, he was just born, for some reason they looked at the TV, and they swear by this. The name Jimmy appeared on the television. Jimmy appeared, the name Jimmy. So we know that he was there. He was never called Jim by most people. It was Jimmy. And so that part was really a cincher, that George Anderson knew what he was talking about and that people can come through. They don't always come through. George explained that to us. Sometimes people go all the way there and no one comes through. But that was very convincing. My son John had many things that George could not have known that he told him. And unlike most people who do attend church, he even mentioned that Jim didn't attend church. How would he know that? You know? And that he was a stern, strict father, and that he apologized to John for that. Everything he told us was pretty much on the button.
Wasn't Dolly born Darlene?
Yeah.
So talk about who she's named after, middle name, all that stuff.
My son John was born John because that's what my father-in-law wanted. He insisted that he be a John. Isak, I wouldn't let them put that middle name in there. I wanted Michael because it sounded good, okay? So he became John Michael Kazaroff. Then my daughter Dolly, when she was born, I just couldn't think of a name. I was pretty distraught at that time because my husband wasn't with me through the labor, and it was a hard time for me because most men are there when the wives are in labor. And a name was the last thing I could think of, and I didn't have anything really picked out. So my sister-in-law suggested Darlene because I had to have a name before I went home from the hospital. I did have a name, I had the name Karen, but I had told an Armenian cousin of Jim's that I was going to name my girl Karen, but she beat me by 2 weeks and she named her daughter Karen. Me thinking I'd live in LA all my life, didn't want to be a copycat to her, although she stole my name. I thought, well, Darlene sounds pretty, so I'll name her Darlene. And then my mom said, well, you put Jim's dad's name on John. Why don't you put Melvin, because Melvin raised me, why don't you put his mother's name in the middle, which was Helen? And Dolly has never really liked the name, but she is technically Darlene Helen. Well, my mother-in-law and my mother were fighting over who's going to take care of her. So both of them wanted to do it at the same time. So rather than do that, Jim hired this nurse who came to the house, and she was staying there with me for a week. And she was holding Dolly and bouncing her back and forth. And she said, why did you name her Darlene? And I said, I didn't really. I said, my sister-in-law did. She said, honey, from this day forward, you have a little doll here. Why don't you call her Dolly? Because that's what she is. So that's how Dolly is still Dolly today.
Really? I thought that happened with Esther or something many years after she was born, no? I don't remember it being Dolly from the time of the baby.
From the time she was born. I see her, she went like this. She was bouncing her. But what they did to you was a crime, but we can't go back that far. They wrapped you so tight. June the 18th, the hottest day in LA, like a tamale. When I had my son John, my mother-in-law's sister named Concha was at the house. No, at the hospital, excuse me, at the hospital. And she wanted to wrap John up. She said, you have to wrap him like a tamale. And she put all these blankets on him so tight. They were receiving blankets, but you know, those are wool. June the 18th, John's sweating. I want to say something, but I'm afraid to say something for fear I'll upset her. And that poor little boy had to come all the way home with his arms down, tied straight down. Oh, if I had it to do over, I would have rewrapped my son.
So whatever happened to them?
To Concha?
No.
To you?
Yeah, to Dolly and John.
When John was growing up and Dolly, they were real close. They were together all the time because there were no kids in the neighborhood. We were the only house on the block for many, many years. And they had each other. They were good kids. When they went outside, I went outside. I knew that nothing better happened to my children or I'd live to regret it. But no, I loved them, and I used to like to watch them play because there wasn't a lot to do. We had an apricot grove across the street, and the Mexican people came every year to pick the apricots, box them, and send them to market. And they would sit out there and make this delicious tortillas and beans, and it was nice. They used to bring some over so we could eat. Kids liked it. Anyway, so as they were growing up, there was a lady across the street who was a Jehovah's Witness. That was a religion, and her name was Ruth Fisher. Very, very nice lady. And I would go over there and stand under her kitchen window with my kids and talk to her about the Bible. I don't know why I didn't go inside. She invited me in, but anyway. And I'd stand there and listen, and she would teach me things from the Bible. The reason I was so wondering about it was my grandmother had died, and I loved her so much, and I missed her so much, that I needed some peace to know that she was okay. And so from the time John was very little, she said, he's going to be someone someday. That boy is going to be someone. And she was right, because he is someone. They've both become the greatest grown-ups. I just hope whoever you are sitting there that I might not get to see are as successful as both of my children. Dolly married a wonderful man named Larry Moreau. He's taken real good care of her. She has a beautiful home. She has everything she wants. So does my son. He's done so well that all of Hollywood knows him. He's in publications all the time. Right now he's running 2 radio stations, 2 of the biggest in Hollywood, K-Big and Coast. And he does so many things. He can edit film. He can do so much. He can act. He's been on television. He's been on what they call telethons to raise money for crippled children and many things. Jerry Lewis is a big star, and he was on his program. He makes many TV appearances. He's a good man.
And what about Dolly?
And she is
And Dolly.
my best, and my daughter Dolly is my best friend. She's there for me. She kind of has a replacement now, which I'm sure eases her. I mean, she's got all these grandchildren. She has a replacement who happens to be sleeping at this moment in the next room. But, and his name is Victor. And he's the best thing that's ever happened in my life. He's the man in my life. We've been together 3 years. He does everything for me. He cares for me. He cooks for me. And he's always there, never raising his voice, always with a smile. And he makes me laugh. That man makes me laugh. And we have conversations which I never had before. My husband, rest his soul, was a workaholic who would fall asleep after dinner and get ready for the next day. Victor is, he is the funniest man I've ever met. Everyone seems to like him. People, strangers come up and talk to him all the time. And my mother said before she died, she said, Betty, God has sent you this man, and now it's time for me to go. And it was only 2 or 3 weeks later, when she was in the hospital, that her request had always been in her mind, and she would say to me, if I could only lay down like I do at night and go to sleep, I wouldn't be afraid to die. And that's exactly what happened. She laid her head on the pillow, because the nurse was there that I know personally, and she was standing there, and my mom laid her head on the pillow, and she went right to sleep. And the nurse looked at her and looked at her again, and she thought she had died, but wasn't sure, so she checked her, and she passed away very peacefully at almost 92. I've been healthy most of my life. When I was 10 years old, I had malaria because I was swimming in a swampy water with mosquitoes in Oklahoma. And actually, I got so thin that the skin, you could see my bones through it. And people came over to my mother's because I was lying outside on what they called a cot. It was a piece of furniture that you can, like a bed. And they were just coming to say goodbye because actually, I guess I was dying. And then my mother got some medicine, some sulfa medicine, pills. They were called 666 tablets. And I took those and I came out of it, luckily. Evidently, I didn't have that bad a case, but I was very, very skin and bones. So I used to watch the kids roll down the hill because there was a steep hill and they rolled down on the grass. That's the way they played. They didn't have things to play with. And I used to lie there and think, I'll never be able to do that. But I did. I was, at that young age, I was a Christian. And I prayed to God to make me well. And I believe in that to this day. I just did it the other day again. Anyway, and until 1989, I've been very healthy. In 89, I was driving home with my husband from Los Angeles. I had gone to see my regular doctor that I'd had for many years, 25, 30 years, 35 years, Dr. Larson. And he did an examination, and he said he thought I had a cancer. And he thought it was cancer of the bladder. Well, when he said the word cancer, I just died right there inside, because that word is a very scary word to hear. My husband was in the next room that overlooked Los Angeles airport. And he said, what's the matter? Because I had this stark white face. And I told him, I said, Jim, excuse me. I said, I'm going to die. And he said, what? I said, I'm going to die. He said, oh, come on. I said, I have cancer and I'm going to die. Dr. Larson said so. He said, oh, no. So Dr. Larson said, Betty, we have to get you in the hospital immediately. So I want to put you in this hospital in Los Angeles. And I said, no, I want to go home. I want to go to Riverside. I don't want to go to Hemet. I want to go to Riverside. Because if I go to Hemet, I will die. I just had this feeling about the hospital here that I'd already been operated on twice. So anyway, we came, we got in the car and started driving home. Well, I felt okay to have lunch, and so we stopped at a place called Knott's Berry Farm. It was an amusement park. And we sat down to have chicken lunch, not dinner, and I couldn't even pick up the fork because the cancer had started bleeding. And so we got in the car immediately, and he knew he had to get me to Riverside fast. So we're driving in the car, and I remember this, but he told me this, Jim did. When we were almost to a place called Corona that was midway from Riverside to from where we came, I was down on my knees on the floor in the car, asking him to go faster because I said, I can't make it. I'm going to die in the car. And I said, oh God, please take me now because I can't stand the pain. If you'll just take me, I'll be happy. So I was ready to go, evidently. And then I told him, I have a nephew, Bobby Overton Jr., that lived in Corona. And I said, Jim, I can't make it to Riverside. You have to get me an ambulance. We can't go fast enough. And my son-in-law's brother, Steve Moreau, ran the big hospital, and he knew the best surgeons, the specialists. And so he got a specialist. Jim phoned him from there. He said, get me somebody good. The specialist was in the operating room and took the call, which is unbelievable, and said, you have time to get her here. That's what Jim was concerned with. He said, don't break your neck, but get her here. So we got there, and the thing that struck me the most was the fact that my husband would never, ever hold my purse for me, but he held it and carried it in because I couldn't. They got me a wheelchair. We went in. Anyway, that was Wednesday afternoon, late. And I had these huge blood clots that was like knives coming out of me. And I thought I was dying. And I guess we got in there and the specialist was through operating and he told them what to do. He didn't know what it was. They wouldn't know what it was until I was cut open. That's what but they had to let me suffer the pain in order to do biopsies and things. So I told him not to tell my children. Jim, I said, don't let the kids know because I just, I don't want to scare them. And for some reason, I wanted to do this thing alone. Why, I'll never know. But at that moment, I did. I guess he told you anyway, because I have a real blank spot in there of what went on. Ironically, this was 2 days before the Oscar Awards, which I watched every year in my life, the Oscars. I've seen them all. Anyway, ironically, they're going to be on tomorrow night, which will be an anniversary of my operation, by the way. It'll make 14 years. It was 1989. My husband nursed me back to health for 2 years, and he died in 91. So they did this. I'm in the hospital. So many people came. Even Roddy from television, the announcer on Price is Right, was there every day. All the cousins, everybody was there, and they were all... My brother told me that his wife was alive then and told me that everybody, including Jim, was out there in the hall and everybody was waiting to see what happened. But the night before the surgery, I wanted to see the Oscars so much, and I couldn't even watch them because in my mind I was saying, am I going to die? And all I could think about was, I heard I'm going to die. But John and Dolly both almost simultaneously told me, Mom, you're not going to die. You're going to be here. I know you're going to be here. both of them, especially Dolly, was adamant on it. She said, they're not ready for you. You're not going to go. So John said something that made a lot of sense to me. He said, I'm going to tell you something important. When they wheel you in tomorrow, he said, say a prayer to God. Please hold my hand going in. But more important, God, hold it coming out. And I did. And God did. And I'll never forget that. I'm so grateful to you for that. To John. And to Dolly for all of her prayers. And all her friends and all their prayers. Everybody in my whole town. All the bank people. Everybody I knew. Went to church and prayed for me. And I made it. The doctor came in after this. Oh, no, I'm on the table. They took out one kidney that was full of cancer. The other one was completely clear. No cancer. But the bad part was, and the reason my surgery is a little different than some people, is it grapevined into my aorta. So they had to call a heart specialist who came running in, is what I heard people say that were there. He was in there an extra hour, I guess, scraping it off. My husband, Armenian Heritage, told them before the surgery, when you go in there, you take everything and lay it out and make sure the cancer didn't go someplace else. Because I don't want you to come out and tell me you think you got it, you might have got it. You either did or you didn't. I don't want to hear anything else. My daughter told me, Dolly, that when they came out, all three surgeons walked out with big smiles. And they said one thing, we got it all. And I'm here today, 14 years later. I never say I beat it. I never said it from the beginning. I never said I beat it. God helped me. That's the only thing I can say.
Well, didn't you have another incident with your eyesight?
Oh, many years before that, when I was 42 or around that age, I had a burning in my eye, my left eye, and it burned terribly. They said it was what a welder feels like when he's burned the inside of his eye. So I went to the doctor and I got to the ophthalmologist who gave me eye drops, and the eye drops actually deadened the eye. Anyway, I kept using them, which I wasn't really supposed to do. Then I started telling him stories that I lost the bottle and this so that I could keep putting it in because my eye burned around the clock. It was so painful, so painful. Then this eye started hurting. But this eye was strictly sympathy with the left eye. And so my husband took me to 9 specialists. One said I was allergic to my dog. One said I was allergic to my husband. One said I was allergic to a certain type of food. One wanted to give me all those things where they poke pins in you, and I didn't want that. Just everything. And so one night I was really, really in pain that I couldn't stand any longer. This eye was swelling like an egg. And I went to a regular medical doctor that I knew his name was Dr. Bumpus. He just passed away. I went to him and he put a cobalt blue medicine in my eye. And when he did, this ulcer that was on the bottom of the eye, on the iris, um, showed up bright orange, this dot. And he said there's a very, very good specialist at UCLA hospital that you can go to that will fix your eyesight. Prior to that, I had seen a specialist in Riverside. Supposed to be Tops. My best friend, Elvira Joyner, drove me over there because I couldn't drive. And when we got out of the car, both eyes went. There was no sight at all. And I have claustrophobia, so I got to where I couldn't breathe with the eyesight gone. So she propped me up against the wall, believe it or not, went down some concrete stairs. She told me about this, to where the doctor was, wanted to find out where the office was, came back real quick, got a hold of me, led me down there. And because of this claustrophobic feeling, they had to give me morphine to put me out so that he could examine my eye. And I think from there is when I went to Bumpus, and then from there to UCLA. I went to Dr. Crawford at UCLA, and he had only had 2 cases of this in his lifetime. My mother was with me. I guess she drove me. I don't remember. Anyway, she was with me, and the doctor put me on the table and said, what have you been doing to your eye? And I told him that I'd been using that medicine. And he said, well, you almost put your own eye out. I'm sorry to tell you. He said, but we can help you. I've had 2 cases. Yours is a 3rd. And he said, you have an ulcer on your cornea. And he said, I have to cut it out. And he said, you're going to swallow whatever goes, because it's all connected, and it'll be the worst thing you've ever swallowed in your life. But don't get upset if you get sick. And they couldn't put me out. I don't remember why. This one was closed completely, like an egg, like the edge of an egg, because it took sympathy with this, so I was blind. And so he did whatever he had to do. They pinned both eyes open, and then he did something with the right, and I remember like a scalpel thing that I could see barely, blurry, coming down at my eye, and then him doing that, I swallowed whatever that was. And then he put these gauze pads that were very thick on my eye, medicine, gauze pads, and like a blindfold, like a black blindfold. And I had to have those on for, Dolly would know better than me, my daughter, 2 or 3 months. And so when I was home, I couldn't, after I went home, I couldn't, I was afraid to go to the door if anybody rang the doorbell, because I didn't know who it might be, if they didn't talk or something, salesman, whatever. And so I kept the door shut most of the time. And I learned to count steps from where I sat in the living room and to the kitchen. I wouldn't cook because I knew I'd burn myself up, because I couldn't see at all. Dolly would change my bandages, God bless her. She was so good. She was just a teenager. And she'd put the medicine on and try to help me. And she got very angry because I had a couple of friends that came over, girlfriends, who thought I could see through those bandages. And so they pushed the coffee table so that I would trip when I got up to walk, to let them out. And she got very upset over that. Why people would do that, I don't know. Needless to say, they're not around anymore. But I lived on sandwiches a lot because that's about all I could do. I kept the peanut butter there, and, and I kept everything where I could get a hold of it. And she got stuff for me, and I got through that one. My eyesight When they first took the bandages off, it was just like a movie that you've seen movies where that happened and everything's real blurry. He said it could come back sometime in my lifetime because they don't know what the virus was. They don't know what causes it, is what he told me. He said later on it could come back, but hopefully it never will.
I thought that it was determined that you had scratched your eye by using hairspray. You got something in there, and the hairspray that you were using clouds of hairspray, and that's why no one could see it originally, because it's a lacquer and it filled in.
But that was after the virus. That didn't cause the virus. That caused that clouding over that I couldn't see. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
Well, it was the mascara brush that started the whole thing.
Yeah, right.
And I did that in Vegas 3 years ago.
So go through your whole life and talk about the animals you have and their names and how they came up with the names and that kind of stuff.
Oh, I've had so many dogs. I love dogs. That's my favorite animal outside of a lion, and they don't let you keep lions at home. Although my girlfriend Nancy had one. But I can't remember my first dog. I had a little, had a white terrier, like one of those little hairless terriers when I was young. Loved that little dog. My mother and I talked about that dog a lot. She loved that dog too. I've always had little dogs. I like dogs that you can pick up and love. And then when I was...
What was its name?
The dog's name? I'm trying to remember. I can't.
Okay, so next one?
The next one, I had many dogs in Oklahoma City. I had 2 or 3. One was called Pal. I had a Pal in Hemet too. It seems like I always name my white dogs that have very little hair on them Pal, because I had 2 named that. I had one named something like Rin Tin Tin. It's the only big dog I ever had. It was a police dog, and I think we called it Rin Tin Tin. That was when I was very little. My brother Bob's dog. Then we moved to Hemet. I didn't have a dog in L.A. If I did, I don't remember. I've always had dogs. I had to have one. Anyway, when we moved to Hemet, I got this black Yorkie Peekapoo. 3 mixed dog. Smartest little dog you ever saw. Used to sit up while the carpenters were working on the roof of the apartments that we built behind our home in Hemet. We had 6 apartments. I didn't know what to name that dog. That wasn't oh no. The first dog I had was a little white with brown on it. That wasn't the Yorkie Peekapoo. What was that dog? It was like a Lhasa Apso, one of those kind of dogs. He used to come around the corner of the kitchen when he was a puppy, and he'd slide on the floor, because the tile was slick. So one day, I didn't have a name, like I said, and I went, "Hi, so there you are." And then I got choked when I tried to call him. I went, "Hi, so," because I liked the sound of those 2 words together. I went, "Hi, so," and he responded to it, so he became Hi-So. The second dog was the one I was just talking about, the solid black dog that became, he was so little and so cute. I named him Killer because he was so little. And I used to, when the gas or electric men would come, I'd say, "Can you wait a minute till I put my killer dog away?" and they'd think it was a great big dog, and it was this little bitty thing. And they used to say, "That's the dog you're talking about?" Yeah, that's the dog. And then I had Pal, who got hit by a car. And I had a favorite dog from across the street. And I can't think of that dog's name. He used to run out in front of all the cars and bark at all the tires. And it was a bird dog, big bird dog. Then I got, what did I get after that? Oh, my Lhasa Apso, whose name was Me Too. I called her Me Too, M-I-T-U. Don't ask me why, I just did. And I sent the papers in as Me Too. And they sent her papers back, her registered papers, as Me Too the 13th. There was 12 Me Too's ahead of her. So I had Me Too the 13th. She was so sweet. Such a nice dog. She lived to be 21 years old. And because, excuse me, because I had lost my other dogs through kindness of food, any kind of food, ice cream, what have you, the vet had told me, if you will just feed your dog once a day, what kind of dog food do I have now? A certain kind of dog food?
Mighty Dog? Mighty Dog?
No, not Mighty Dog, the other one. Begins with a P. Anyway. Anyway, if you'll just feed your dog that once a day.
Pedigree.
Pedigree. Good dog food. It'll live a long time. When that dog died, and I took it to Temecula to the vet because it was Sunday, and all our vets do not work on Sunday, the girl that was the vet couldn't believe it. My daughter and son-in-law were with me, and she said, when did you get this dog? And I said, 21 years ago. I have the papers. She said, this dog has lived a long, long life. 21 years is so long for a dog. If it's 7 years to a human, that's a long time. And now, because my granddaughter had to start leaving her little Yorkie outside, actually it's a Silky Terrier, but they say it's a Yorkie. I'll go by that. His name is Brandon. He's the cutest little thing you ever saw. Has a little face like a fox. And he was running away because he didn't like being pinned up. So Brandon has become our dog. I say our dog because I told you I'm with Victor. And Victor takes very good care of Brandon. Brandon sleeps on the edge of Victor's bed. Victor feeds him and makes sure that he gets a massage every morning when he wakes up. The dog lives like a queen, king. He's, I have two picture windows that have seats on them that he can sit up there and look out the window and be the height of the people walking by, and he loves it. He gets the star treatment.
Wasn't there a dog named Neil?
Neil was the one that was a black and white dog. That was my first dog, Neil.
Okay. Go through the grandkids now, I guess.
Dolly and Larry, my son-in-law and daughter, their children's name are Mark and his wife Amy, and then their daughter is Jamie. Mark and Amy have a son named Kyle, and they have a son named...
Chick.
I want to say Gus. Why do I want to call the... Oh, man. I love that little boy. I love both those little boys, but why do I call him Gus? Must be from another life or something. So they have Kyle and Jake. I didn't really like the name Jake at first, but I love it now. I really do. That's probably why I call him Gus. No, I love Jake and Kyle. They're very, Kyle is very, very smart. Man, he can count to 100 and he's only 4. And he knows a lot. He has the brains. Jake I feel is going to be a wrestler. He's a strong little boy, and he can take up for himself. And he's 2. Then Jamie has her 2 children. She has Jimmy, who she named after my husband who died. Jimmy is 4, and he's very theatrical. He can tell you stories. Today he told us stories about the Bible, about Easter, how it came about Jesus on the cross with the nails in his hands. It was something else. The stone rolling away, the whole bit. He's a very smart little boy also. Then there's Jillian, who is 6 months old, has blue eyes. Everybody in the family except her daddy has brown eyes. We all have brown eyes. She has this real fair white skin. We all have sort of a tan color. And she has a blondish red hair, which we've never had a redhead. But Larry's father, Lauren Moreau, was a redhead. And his wife was Marianne, is Marianne. She lives across the street from Dolly and Larry. So we have quite a family. I have one nephew, Bobby Jr., whose wife is Sandy Overton. They live in Riverside. We're all close. They have 2 daughters. One is named Lori. She was born on my mother's birthday, October 4th. My mother was born in 1909. And the other one is Lori and Kimberly. Nice young girls. Lori married a man who preaches in church. She's a very well-paid attorney, lawyer in Los Angeles. And Kimberly is somewhere in LA, I don't know.
And so how did you meet Victor?
I met Victor in a restaurant. He was coming out and I was going in. And we met. And we started talking. How did we, can you help me?
Yeah, look at him, not me.
Refresh my memory, please.
We met, you asked me if I come here often.
Oh, yeah.
I said yeah, and invited you, so on and so forth. Remember, we went for
Coffee.
Yeah.
So say,
We went for coffee.
Go ahead from the beginning.
Oh, I was with Doreen, my girlfriend. We had gone and we were eating, okay? But we were going for coffee. Why would we be eating and going? Oh, no, we ate breakfast after that, didn't we? Okay. We were having coffee, okay? And we were going to go to breakfast because that restaurant was closing. So we had to go someplace where they had breakfast, like Denny's. So anyway, we were going to go to Denny's. And Victor and I struck up a conversation. And I just didn't do that. I had done it with one other man before, and it was just conversation. But for some reason, he seemed to be kind of outstanding. And so he said, can I take you girls to breakfast? And Doreen, naturally, Doreen, she's another friend of mine. She's been my friend for almost 50 years. So has Elvira. But anyway, we went out to breakfast and got into quite a lengthy conversation. So I gave him my phone number because he said, can I call you sometime and invite you out to dinner? And I said, oh, yeah, okay. So about a week went by and he called. And he said, would you go out to dinner with me? And I said, I will meet you for dinner because I didn't know him. And in this day and age, you can't, I was going with Dolly to Morongo that night. We were going to go gamble a little bit. And I said, where do you want to go? And he said, well, no, you name the place. I said, well, we're going to Morongo. Do you know where that? Yes, I do. So he went. I went. I got there first. So Dolly and I were gambling at that time. We'd been there about 10 minutes. And Dolly mentioned this herself. We smelled this cologne. We could smell it from a distance. And I went like this, and I turned and looked. And here he was coming down the stairs with the biggest grin I ever saw, dressed really good, and this wonderful cologne. I looked at the women that were playing machines, and they were all going like that. Anyway, it was the smell that got me, really. So he said he didn't know I brought my daughter, okay? So I didn't tell him on the phone. He came over and he said, you look very nice. He was always complimenting me. He still does. If I put on something at home and he likes it, he tells me right away. And he's always fixing this and fixing that. Make sure that I look okay. Put on a necklace. Do this, do that. So anyway, he said, are you ready for dinner? And I said, mm-hmm. And Dolly looked over, and she said, I'm going too. Oh, no, he bent down and he kissed me right here. And Dolly turned around at that time and saw that. And she had this big grin on her face. She was all for it at that time, I guess. Anyway, so we went in the restaurant and we ate. And it took like an hour or so. And we were in this big booth. Okay? Wait a minute. She was going to come in later. She said, go ahead and order, or something to that effect. And I went in. Oh, my stomach was doing flutters, butterflies. It was like your prom date. I sat here, big round booth. He was over here. He came in and sat down. I sat down first because he went to wash his hands. He looked at me. I'm way over there, practically falling out of the booth. He said, what are you doing way over there? I said, oh, I don't know, I'm kind of nervous. And he said, come and sit by me. Come over here. So I went over, but I didn't go real close. I mean, I left a little space in between. So anyway, we ordered. I think Dolly came in and ate. I can't remember whether she ate or she wanted to gamble. But anyway, we were in there talking for 3 hours. 3 hours. Just about our life and about your dad, my husband dying, and everything. It was from day one, sort of like this video. So anyway, he said, do you like music? And I said, I really like music. He said, would you like to hear a song that I sing? And I said, yeah. The restaurant's crowded now, believe me. And it was about something about mama, about a mother. I think she was dying or something, and the boy was singing this song to mama, and it was a tearful song, and it was in Italian, and he sings really good. He sang this song in that restaurant, and after he got through, I almost cried. The people all went like this, and they were all smiling, and everybody was happy there, and then he always does a funny thing. When the moon hits your eye like Dean Martin, like a big pizza pie, that's amore. So he'd get me out of my crying thing. And anyway, that was the beginning of a 3-year relationship. And he would drive from Los Angeles to Hemet just to come and see me, sit, watch TV or whatever, or we'd go out to dinner or whatever. We went into Los Angeles to the Coast. My son runs Coast Radio. They had a Valentine's party. Oh, I'll never forget that night. Never. We had the best time. I danced every dance with him, and he can really dance. He loves to dance. And I lost 20 pounds, put it back on, but I lost it for a while. And it was just wonderful. John is forever giving, my son, forever giving us tickets to different things, plays, and The Lion King was a stage play, and all kinds of things. We get to go to the award shows. Victor wore a tuxedo to the American Music Awards, and I wore a fancy dress, and we got to go behind stage with Dick Clark and all the movie stars and the record stars, and to get to meet those people. And one time I was 3 feet away from Liz Taylor and Tina Turner, and these things were, they mean so much to me because I've always been a groupie. Even though I'm old, I'm a groupie still. And I met Lionel Richie, and he kissed me on the cheek and thrilled me to pieces. And I talked to, I can never think of his name, Michael Bolton on the telephone. He was real nice to me. And all these people that my son knows in the business, they all send me pictures and autographs. And my daughter Dolly, being his sister, gets to go to most of the things too. She's gone to lots of American Music Awards, and we've laughed and gone backstage and ate the good food and the ice sculptures and got autographs, and it's been a real nice life.